Hello.
Hello.
Welcome. Episode 27 of the Ops team.
Which is being shot in at 27 degrees.
Yeah.
environment.
Yeah, 27 degrees Fahrenheit to commemorate our 27th episode. We're in our new studio. It seems that somebody has not put a coin in the meter to pay the latest electricity bill or gas bill because it is freezing. We've actually been into the lab with all of our servers and air conditioning to warm up. It is so cold in here. You can't quite see our breath, but the hot drink is certainly helping. But for those of you not familiar and new to the show, welcome. It's a sometimes weekly, sometimes with 4 technical evangelists.
4.
Sometimes 4, yeah. Obviously, it's just the 2 of us this week because David couldn't make it. A show focused on IT operations, DevOps, IT infrastructure, and we each typically have a couple of areas that we go through and spend around about 5 minutes talking about each of those areas. So I tend to cover on-premises and hybrid stuff, and I've been covering Azure while we're still hiring for a replacement for Mr. Rick Claus, who's left the team, seems like forever ago, and it was forever ago. Oz covers DevOps and open source. David covers DevOps stuff exclusively as well. And yeah, so that's the format of the show. So this week, following on from last session's announcements on all the PowerShell stuff and all the great stuff that came out then, it's been a quiet week for me. I was really kind of hunting around for information that I think would be relevant to people.
Pre-Ignite, silent.
Yeah, everyone's keeping the cards close to the chest ahead of Ignite, which is later this month, later in September, assuming I get it out by Ignite. If this is after Ignite, then hope you enjoyed Ignite. No, I will get it out before Ignite. So I've got a couple of things for Azure and a couple of other things for on-prem and hybrid stuff. And I know you've got some open source and DevOps stuff. So we shall kick off. It probably makes sense for me to go first.
Yeah, you go first.
Because I was going to say, shall we toss a coin? But then I don't have any coins. Do you have any coins?
Who has a coin?
Anymore? Yeah, who has coins? And then I was thinking, do you have any cash?
I
But
have my debit card.
I don't have any cash, so we'd have to just flip a card,
Yeah.
which probably doesn't work as well. So I will kick off with some great Azure stuff, some news, not a huge amount of stuff, but some useful stuff nonetheless. So let me start the timer with 5 minutes. Here we go. Oh, I didn't have the volume switched up. Here we go again. You ready? There we go. Yeah, great. With the power of editing, that will have looked seamless. Right. The first thing that I stumbled upon today, actually, at time of recording, I was delving into my Twitter feeds and seeing what people were talking about and useful news and stuff. Because, as I said before, the blogs and the information coming out of the Azure and the on-prem related teams is relatively light ahead of Ignite. But I did stumble upon something that's been published that I think everyone will find useful, especially if you're interested in Azure. And best of all, above all other things, it's great because it's free, and everybody loves free, unless you're charged for your bandwidth to download it, in which case it will cost you a little bit of money. But what I'm talking about is a free ebook from Microsoft Press on Microsoft Azure Essentials, the fundamentals of Azure. And it's the 2nd edition, so it's just been published, recently updated. And the challenge with any of these ebooks is keeping them up to date, because the first one, the Fundamentals of Azure, would have been published a while back. And if it's anything relating to the classic model or the old way of doing things, it's out of date, and it doesn't help with people embracing Azure now. So this ebook, it's free to download. I'll provide the links in the notes. There's lots of useful information. You can download as PDF or as companion content, and there will be EPUB and Mobi for Kindle formats available soon as well, not just yet. So if you just want to grab the PDF, you can do that. But there's sections on getting started with Azure, the app service and web apps, virtual machines, storage, virtual networks, databases, Azure AD, management tools, additional services, that aren't covered in the book but might be in the future. So Service Fabric, it's a shame that's not made it in, but it's still relatively new. The container service is relatively new as well, and some of the business scenarios like mobile apps, machine learnings, infra modernization and stuff. So definitely worth checking out. Like I say, I'll provide all the links to that. And yeah, so it's written by a senior software development engineer in DXTED, Michael Collier. He's actually got the same role as me, but he probably is a much better developer than I am. And a person called Robin E. Shahan, consulting. So yeah, 6-time MVP, and works as a content developer for Azure Storage.
Cool.
So, yeah, cool stuff. So definitely worth checking out and reading that. Even if you just skim through it, it's free. It's not going to cost you anything. So, right. So that's part one of how you can start to embrace and learn stuff around Azure. And the second part is around hybrid IT management. Azure obviously is a part of that. And we've just released, it seems like forever ago that we actually filmed it, but we just released part 3 of the hybrid IT management course. Part 1 was all about log analytics with OMS, monitoring and collecting the logs from your resources on Azure, on-prem, wherever they may be. Part 2 was about backup, using Azure Backup, DPM, disaster recovery, and so on. Part 3 is all about automation. Now, automation in Azure is, some people still know it as Azure automation. I know it as OMS automation. Whichever way you shape it, however you call it, automation is a big deal, and it exists and runs in Azure and can automate your Azure workloads and resources and your on-prem workloads and resources. And there's a great agenda from introducing hybrid IT management, getting started, and we walk you through with lots and lots of demos how you get started with OMS automation. We build runbooks with PowerShell, we build runbooks graphically, we utilize the automation gallery to pull in other people's work and enhance and utilize that for our automation. We migrate runbooks from System Center, Orchestrator to the automation capabilities in Azure Automation. We talk about hybrid cloud automation with hybrid workers, DSC, loads of stuff in there. So if you're interested in automation and you want to know more and you want to watch as I try and ask some intelligent questions of people who know a lot about automation, then this course is pretty useful. And I think it's 3 or 4 hours long. So definitely worthwhile if you do want to learn a bit more about automation. And it's just been released in the last week or two.
It's completely free.
Oh yeah, it's on the Microsoft Virtual Academy. Yeah, I should have made that clear. Yeah, it's completely free. You can watch it and yeah, follow along. Like I say, there's lots of useful video, but lots of useful demos and stuff that we showed as well. So those are my 2 Azure. I'm sure your stuff will touch on Azure a little bit as well, but they're the key things that I thought this week were actually pretty useful to help you learn, help you skill, and move forward with your Azure knowledge. So I'm gonna shut the timer off before I get to the cow, and it was 10 seconds to go. That's efficient for you there.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's me for the first one. So over to you. You're going to cover open source and DevOps related stuff. Now, obviously, you've got a lot to cover there, so it might not be 5 minutes, but I'll give you my 10 seconds.
Yeah, I don't have many to cover, and I can feel my hands, so I don't know how to click.
This nice cup of tea is going to keep me lovely and warm. Right.
British.
I was desperate to drink it. I was kind of in the corner of my eye. I was like, I really need to drink my tea because it's like -4 in here.
Start my 5 minutes.
Yeah, here we go.
So the first announcement is Azure App Service MySQL in-app. So before that, when you have a web application, if you need to have a MySQL server, you have options that you would either use the marketplace, one of the marketplace images in Azure, or you can use the ClearDB service, which is ClearDB is a partner of us, and they're providing MySQL service. But if you're developing very fast, especially on PHP, you would not want to have this extra hop in your network, because when you're keeping your MySQL server out of Azure, you have to have some, you're going to have some latency. You need to, make some plans about building infrastructure, etc. This new service is aiming to solve this. Currently, it's on preview. There are some limitations, but the nice thing is, when you create a new app, now there's a checkbox. It just says, do you also want to create a MySQL server in the same server with the application? If you say yes, if you choose this, it will just give you a MySQL server. So your application and MySQL server are using the same storage. They are on the same hardware. So the communication between them is pretty fast.
So is that a MySQL VM? So it's a Linux VM with MySQL, or is it a MySQL? I don't know what's.
It's like it's just a database. It doesn't give you the whole VM.
Oh, right. So it's MySQL
resources.
as a service, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. So right. But it locates it on all of the same resources in the same resource group.
Exactly,
and, right.
and the same storage. But since it's in preview, there are some limitations, like you are not able to scale this. There's no auto scaling for this because it's sharing resources with other stuff. You cannot have more than one. What I mean is, normally when you have an app, you would want to have a production slot and a testing slot, for example, and you would use the same database and just switch the application from testing to production.
Right.
Right now, you need to have two separate databases, which is not a bad thing. Some people prefer this because they want to keep two different databases, different schemas or thing. So there's a good blog post about this. It's not, we are not recommending for this for production now, obviously, it's in preview. But for web development purposes, especially for PHP development, it's really nice. You can just, you don't have to use any external database. You can just use that is created automatically.
So that would be the option. Otherwise, you'd probably stand up your MySQL database first, and then you'd point the installation you were making at that existing
This
database.
will be one of the options.
Right.
I think it's the most practical option as of today. It's in preview, and the good thing is you are not paying any extra.
Right.
You're just paying for the app service, so you're not paying for the database. Again, if you're developing something, you wouldn't want to have production level costs. So it's a great thing to have.
Cool.
And for the DevOps part, that was for the open source part, we are announcing some changes, upcoming changes about how you log into Visual Studio Team Services. So up until now, Visual Studio Team Services was using its own login system, if I may. We are converting this to the, our Active Directory login system. I mean, it's just like what you're using for Office 365 or Azure.
Yeah.
Depending.
So ADFS or...
Exactly. Depending on the email address you put, it just redirects you to your company portal or Microsoft Live account portal.
That makes sense.
Yeah, so you don't have to figure out what's happening. And after this Active Directory integration is fully implemented, of course, it will open other doors, like maybe authentication with different applications and stuff. So it's really nice. So we're going to have the same experience around Visual Studio Team Services login as well. And speaking of trainings, we have 4 really good trainings about, particularly about microservices. If you are, just following what's happening in infrastructure space, you would, I think you're starting to hear more and more about microservices. It's kind of a design pattern about applications. So if you want to learn what is this microservices thing and how I can, have some idea about this thing, we have, again, free trainings on MVA. The first one is called Introductions to Microservices, which makes sense to watch first. And after you finish this, you can watch Microservices Design and Pattern. So it gives you further information about the design of your, how your application should be designed if you want to use a microservices architecture. And then more like real-life scenarios. How do I deploy a Dockerized app to Azure Container Services? It just follows you step by step from creating your app and hearing your cow and then deploying to Azure
Nicely worked in.
Yeah, Azure Container Services. And finally, this is the, I think, most advanced one, building distributed applications and microservices-based apps on Azure Container Services. Even the title takes...
So you recommend starting with that one and working back?
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, start with that one and work back to the introduction.
Yeah.
The nice thing, I was just flicking through some of these courses actually because I thought, well, actually they sound quite useful from my perspective, for me, being that infrastructure guy, but hearing more and more about microservices. And they're actually nice, quite short courses, 2 hours for the introduction. The last one, the advanced one, I think was, or the next one was an hour. So yeah, and you could probably dedicate an afternoon or two, or an evening or a couple of evenings, and get through a lot of this and consume it, obviously on demand in your own time. But if you want to blast through it, you can get through it quite quickly.
Don't get intimidated. It's a new thing, but it's not like super complex, super hard. It's just like a way you design things. So. Just watch the trainings. You'll see what I mean.
Cool. Yeah, lots of useful courses there. It's an MVA themed.
Yeah, exactly.
Ops team. Well, I've got no MVAs recommended in this next section for on-prem. Is that all your stuff done? Have you got?
Yeah.
Yeah. Cool. So, but I have actually got a nice order to my news items, which I hope you'll notice.
Okay.
Right.
No pressure.
No pressure. So. 5 minutes on-prem stuff, which everybody loves. Here we go. Nice. So the first thing is around storage. Now, you mentioned storage before, so there's a nice segue there. Completely different, but You mentioned the word storage. And this is talking about Storage Spaces Direct, new in Windows Server 2016. And I had time to catch up with the guys in the Channel 9 studio, the guys from the Windows Server and Windows Storage team, Cosmos Darwin, pretty cool name, and Tobias as well, Klima, superhero names. I felt intimidated, actually. And we chatted about the new ability that they're bringing to Windows Server 2016 and Windows 10, actually, to update drive firmware without downtime. Now you think, well, okay, does that ever bother me? Do I ever really update drive firmware on, let's say, my laptop?
Yeah.
You probably don't really think about it, but in the server world, it's especially important as vendors and companies bring new functionality and features to their stack, and sometimes they need an update to the underlying disk, because a disk isn't just a disk, there is some intelligence behind there, that we need to have special firmware created to enable these features, not just for Microsoft, but across the board, across different vendors. Now, traditionally, updating disks firmware, if you've got a SAN, you'll probably have a SAN UI that you upload the new firmware from your SAN vendor and it goes and does it all. But in these more software-defined solutions, especially where you've just got local storage, solutions like that perhaps don't yet exist, or they're not as efficient, or they're very manual, or, as the name and the title suggests, without downtime, they incur downtime. But Microsoft is working with partners to deliver a solution and a standardized approach to automating the deployment of and updating of drive firmware without downtime to running workloads and stuff that's using those drives. So without going into too much more detail, check out the video. It's about 20 minutes long. There's a good demo in there that shows the impact, and there's a useful overview from the guys as well, going into some depth about how it works, what we're doing, how we're automating all the process as well. So it's cool stuff. You can't do a lot with it today because not all the drive manufacturers support it yet, and there's not firmware that's in this process yet, but we are working with all the relevant players to make this a reality in the upcoming near future. So that was Storage Spaces Direct. Now, hyperconverged with Storage Spaces Direct is hyperconverged with Spaces, Storage, and Hyper-V. So that brings me nicely onto my next talking point of Hyper-V. Now, I've done a couple of talks on Hyper-V over the last couple of months throughout the technical preview timeframe, and I've always said scalability, it's huge already based on 2012 R2 figures. We don't really need to make it any bigger, like how many VMs we can support, how many virtual processors, all of that stuff.
Who needs a 1 terabyte VM?
Yeah, who needs a 1 terabyte VM? I would love to have some of this sized hardware, but it's big enough for pretty much all organizations. Well, things have changed, and we actually announced at the tail end of August increases to the scalability levels. So get ready for this. If you haven't already read about this, I'll link to the blog post. Yeah, drum roll, here we go. It's like having David in the room, just randomly banging his hands on the table. Physical host memory support has gone from 4 terabytes in 2012 R2 to 24 terabytes per physical server. I would love to have a server that has 24 terabytes of RAM.
Or you can easily buy a car instead of the cost for 24
Well, potentially. Today, maybe, but in the future, who knows? Are the lights flickering based on the information? The scale is just getting too much for the lights. Physical logical processor support, so host logical processors. 320 in 2012 R2, 512 in 2016, standard and data center. Virtual machine memory. 1 terabyte per VM in 2012 R2, 16 terabytes per VM in 2016.
16 terabytes.
Can you imagine 16 terabyte? Imagine the page file. You probably wouldn't need a page file anyway. And then virtual processor support, 64 virtual processors per VM, which was one of the things where VMware edged ahead in vSphere 6 to 128. Well, now 240 virtual processors per VM. Seems like a strange number to have. Like, why is it not 256? But it probably comes down to testing, essentially. But still, if you need to create a 240 virtual processor VM, boom, Hyper-V. And that's in addition to all the great stuff that Hyper-V provides, like shielded VMs, the scale-out file server containers, all of that stuff. So great scalability coming in Hyper-V, and there's a great blog post that outlines some more of that. And Hyper-V is the platform for Azure, so you can imagine that some of these huge workloads, as Azure transitions to the 2016 Hyper-V, they'll be exposed to Azure as well. And you can already create pretty big workloads in Azure already, but the two will obviously converge. So sticking with Hyper-V, because that is... I'm still going to carry on. That scalability might be one of the reasons you decide to weigh up a migration from an alternative virtualization platform like VMware to Hyper-V. And we've published a new site and set of offers for you to migrate if you want to switch to Hyper-V. So there's a great website. You can calculate TCO. There's information on how you can migrate and enhance your platform and evolve your career as well. So I'll make sure I'll link to that. There's some useful insight onto there if you're weighing up a migration. Maybe you're looking to justify a business case of migration, because Hyper-V can certainly save you a lot of money. There's very few, if any, reasons why Hyper-V wouldn't suit your needs now. Yes, there's always going to be tick boxes on one platform that are not on the other, and vice versa. Shielded VMs is one that's very attractive now for the Hyper-V platform. Doesn't exist on other virtualization platforms. But regardless of that, check out the resources and see maybe you can save some cash, or I almost guarantee you will save some cash, and see what options there are for you to migrate. And then the final thing, if you do choose to stick on VMware virtualization, perhaps maybe a part of your infrastructure is still on VMware, then we've actually just recently announced on the official Data Protection Manager team blog, System Center Data Protection Manager, that we now support VMware VM backup. So we've been doing Hyper-V VM backup for a while, so you don't need an agent in the VM. You can just back up at the host level and it will protect those virtual machines. But now we're using, with DPM in the latest update rollups, you're now able to protect VMware infrastructure using VMware's VADP APIs. So again, it's an agentless backup. You don't need agents inside the VM. Without installing agents on vCenter or the ESXi hosts themselves. So it's integrated into the vSphere infrastructure, backing up those virtual machines, vSphere 5.5 and 6, agentless. It'll discover your vCenters or ESXis, folder-level backup VMs stored on NFS, SAN, direct attached, and recover files and folders of Windows VMs. So there's a short video on the blog post as well, which I'll link to. Lots of useful insight there. And obviously, it's now got integration with the cloud as well. So Azure Backup could be used as well and that's detailed in the blog post as well.
Cool stuff.
Yeah, so lots of Hyper-V related stuff and a bit of storage and a bit of VMware stuff for you there as well. And that is my 5 minutes plus on on-prem infrastructure. Yeah, should we see what's going on Twitter quickly? Let me see if I can find it. Let's bring up at the ops team. Let's search for that. Followers 395. That's definitely gone. That's definitely gone up. I think it was like 360 or something last time we checked. So yeah, nothing too much going on there. But yeah, hit us up on at the ops team if you want to get in touch with us. Can't even speak anymore. It's the cold.
And it's blowing. It's blowing cold.
Yeah, it's like, oh my goodness. So yeah, if you want to get in touch with us at the ops team or at Matt McSpirit,
at Oğuz Pastırmacı,
and all the links and all the resources and everything we've talked about will be available in the notes under the video. And yeah, thanks for watching, and we'll see you again soon in episode 28 next time. See you later.